and the governance of DCAT-AP. I would like to grab the opportunity to introduce you to a member of the SEMIC team that joined the SEMIC team almost 6 months ago. My dearest colleague Alexandra Balachoura, that is attending the meeting, the webinar. Alexandra, would you like to say a few words?
Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here and meet everyone. Thank you for the invitation. I know that you have been working very hard and that these efforts are very appreciated as well regarding DCAT-AP. And I think DCAT-AP is a very important specification in the SEMIC portfolio, and that it's becoming more and more important also for data spaces, for high-value data sets, and in general, it's a versatile tool that can be employed for many strategic applications. So I'm looking forward to hearing about the status and the governance of DCAT-AP and what the next steps are. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexandra. So the agenda of today is first of all to resolve some open DCAT-AP high-value dataset issues, as well as to discuss and present upcoming and ongoing activities within the DCAT-AP ecosystem, and if times allows us to start digging a bit on pending issues regarding the DCAT-AP 3 in order to receive some initial feedback from your side, and wrap up and finish with the wrap up and the next steps. Next slide, please. So you're all aware of the technicalities. We kindly ask you to mute your microphone, share your questions in the chat, and or raise your hands so that you can speak. And we kindly ask you for your permission to record the current webinar. So you are all aware of the SEMIC's goal that tries to promote semantic interoperability through the creation, use, and reuse of semantic assets, experience, and tools. As it is the case of the high-value dataset, we try to identify opportunities for alignment of semantic definitions, metadata, and reference data sources, and raise awareness of the importance of data and data metadata management. Here is a list of the semantic assets that are maintained under the SEMIC action, as well as you were interested in the lower part, and especially in the DCAT-AP and its variations, as well as SDMX. Next slide, please. So I'm giving the floor to my colleague Verban to continue with the presentation.
Welcome to this afternoon webinar on DCAT-AP. And so what I want to give you first is an overview that this work is what we will present today is started earlier on this year, in the beginning of 23, and then we had over summer a long public review period, and then we wrapped and brought all these issues together to have today a first step, and this is our objective, to work on the annex DCAT-AP for high-value datasets and to make a closure of that as a first stage, and then continue today maybe, but certainly next webinar on the 21st of November on the more technical stuff that has been raised during the public review on DCAT-AP. So that's the next webinar. So we already have your invitation on it. And then, of course, what's today? So as I said, we first focus on high-value data sets. And then we will give you an overview over all the activities that are happening within the ecosystem of DCAT-AP, because it's important, I think, that everyone is aware and how we try to align, because that has impact on how we will address certain issues. So it's good to know what are the activities ongoing and how the things are interfering on each other and supporting each other. And the content, or we already list or try to list first good outlook for the content of the 21st of November, so they can prepare and have good discussions over them at that moment in time. So we will start first with the issues related to DCAT-AP high-value datasets, to that annex. If we look back to our review periods, then we see that we have almost 102 issues open today. And of these, if we do this work today and next time, then we will probably be able to close quite a number of them. We hope around 80 to really to close, so that we have a new version of DCAT-AP and a first stable release of DCAT-AP for high-value datasets. And the biggest important thing is, of course, that the community, so this amount of issues shows that there's a good review has been done, and the people who did the efforts did a good effort to point out where all the important changes and that we have to adjust, or minor mistakes that we can adjust. So if we look then to high-value datasets, of these 102, there are 25 tagged with the label high-value datasets. And of these, the majority were for informational or textual bug, so that we made a mistake and that we can just fix by an editorial change. There are 6 of them that we want to discuss with you today. So that we want to have an alignment before we can create a first release of the annex for high-value datasets. And this annex will be a bit of dependent on how it looks like, will be dependent as well on the webinar of 21st of November, because in the webinar of 21st of November, we will discuss how the profiles should be editorially given, organized, and this might have an impact on the current look and feel of the DCAT-AP annex for high-value datasets. So we will sketch what is the possible impact, editorial impact later on. So we will first go and have a look to the individual issues which have related to properties and which are required some clarifications and some feedback from you. If we look to our annex for DCAT-AP for high-value datasets, then we will see that this is actually visually a subset of DCAT-AP. It has a fewer set of terms, and only those terms that you see here are mentioned in the annex, in the high-value datasets implementing regulation, and have a metadata counterpart. So what has a metadata counterpart in this implementing regulation that we tried to highlight and to position on DCAT-AP. And on these, you have been doing your review, and what we come out is that we see that there are a few elements which requested some discussion. The first one is on the usage and the presence of the new property high-value dataset category, more specifically on the cardinalities of this property. There is a topic raised with regard to the quality of service. That's in the level of data service. There has been a topic raised on the contact point and on over there. We have something that we want to share with you. There's a topic raised that has to do with publishers. And finally, a topic that has to do with the class catalog. It started from the property application legislation, so the newly introduced property applicable legislation, and how it should be interpreted in the context of a catalog. So that are the topics that we will discuss now, step by step, one by one. And as usual, Max Dekkers will moderate the discussions. So a first topic that I want to share with you and want to have your feedback upon is the usage of the property high-value dataset category. So the question that was raised in the issue 307 is that, yeah, on which entities, on which classes is it really necessary to present or to give a value to this property? And if we look to that one, then there are different interpretations or feelings around is this all of each one necessary? If we look to a distribution, and a distribution is a physical representation of a data set, then we will see that normally the category will not change from distribution to distribution. So if you have a data set identified in a high-value dataset category, then this will probably apply for all the distributions that you want to share in the context of high-value datasets. So in that sense, it will not change. And so the question is, should we then present or give it a value as it was in the cardinalities today? Present, you should give at least a value. We could do the same assessments for dataset and data service. For dataset is, I think it's obvious that we want to have it. But for a data service, which is a representation mostly about an API that is connected to some data sets. So in that sense, yeah, we could say it could be derived from. So we could derive the high-value dataset category from the dataset that is connected with from that service. However, in DCAT, if we look to it, a dataset and a data service are at the same level. They are both cataloged resources, and an API or a data service can serve multiple datasets, possibly on distinct domains. So that last one, that situation for a data service means that there's still some situations possible, that there are differences, and it would be good to make the high-value dataset category property mandatory for a data service. So this is our proposal, is to keep it mandatory for a dataset, keep it mandatory for a data service, and have it optional for distribution. So that is the proposal. As a side note, I want to mention that you see on the right-hand side that the code list, the controlled vocabulary, has been published in the meantime. That was not at the beginning of the public review available. Now it's available, so we share the link here. So I would like to open the floor now if there's people have other opinions or what's how we can address this issue.
Matthias has a comment to propose to delete it, to remove it from distribution rather than having an option.
That's a possibility, yes.
Matthias, do you want to say why you want to do that?
I didn't hear a reason for why it could be on the distribution. Is there one example when you have two different values on the distribution? If so, then optional, otherwise remove.
Yeah, at this moment, I don't think I have a, yeah, since we are at the beginning of the implementation, I don't have a first, clear case on it. Yeah.
I didn't mean in a clear case today. I meant, can we think of a scenario where it would make sense?
Yeah, so.
Any comments from the others? So is the proposal to either to remove it now or to investigate use cases? Brett, what is your opinion?
I can optional or removal in sense of if the removal is a suggestion. I think this is fair. It can be fair. It can be as a good proposition. It will not change, I think, the usability and the need at the moment.
I see a comment from Ansi from Finland, who also agrees to remove it, and also Jakob Klimek also. But there's also a question from Sander, whether it's even necessary to have a specific property for the category on the data set. Sander, you want to say something about that?
Yes, I was just thinking about we have on the catalog we have the property where you can indicate which team taxonomy you actually want to be using. So it would, within the context of a catalog, you could already indicate that you might use concepts in the team with the team property to classify a data set according to that concept scheme. So I'm just wondering if we actually need to specify, I mean, to close down this in an application profile specifically, or whether to use the existing logic on DCAT itself. I'm just wondering if, I mean, making these more specific properties, if it's not harming interoperability instead of, I don't know, it's just a different way of looking at it, I suppose.
Bert, maybe explain why there is a separate property for this?
Yeah, so these properties have been introduced for two purposes, and the purposes is to clearly identify, and on one hand, to which legislation an entity and the catalog resource belongs, or why is the reason that it exists, or it complies to. So that's applicable legislation. We made it explicitly open so that it can be used for multiple legislation, so it's not closed on one, and it's not applicable for high-value data sets. No, it's applicable legislation, and we refer to the LI. That's one, and that's the need for that, so that we can have cross of multiple reuse of that one. So that's a need addressing that. And the other one is that the need for high-value data set category is a separate need coming from the legislation, from the implementing regulation. And that is a separate category than any other category. We should not, I think we should not debate on whether or not a geospatial high-value dataset category is the same as a geospatial category somewhere else. All right, so this is beyond scope. So making it nicely separating, and it can be reused. And this one, the last one, this high-value data category is actually a specific one. It will be only applicable for this implementing regulation. There's no meaning or otherwise. Is that clear, Sander? There's a reason why it's introduced.
Yeah, sure. I mean, for me, it's a specialization of a classification one way or another. I'm just wondering that, I mean, for from a perspective of software or systems out there, by creating a different property outside of the regular DCAT world? Whether
I think that's Sander, I think that's a topic that we will discuss in the next webinar. That's
okay.
That's a topic for the next webinar.
I also wanted to note that Ludger has a comment about the category on distributions, because he says not all distribution of a data set need to be compliant with the HVD regulation.
Yes, that corresponds. Yes,
that is so in contrary to what Matthias said, or what you said earlier. If you have a data set that is compliant with HVD, then all the distributions are.
Yeah, wait, it's not. It's you have applicable legislation will be present, so you will be able to indicate which are the distributions.
We're talking about the categories.
Yeah.
Not the application, not the legislation.
Yeah, so you know to whether it is applicable.
Yeah.
But now the question is it possible that a distribution can have a different category as its data set? And thus, Ludger says that it's possible. That it's...
No, Ludger says it's possible that it does that. Not all the distributions are compliant with the HVD regulation. But
Which
I
is
think
fine.
what you just said, Bert, that if
I mixed
it
it up.
is,
I'm sorry.
then all the distributions are in the same category.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Does that make sense, Sander?
So Ludger, you agree? You understand? So it's you were interfering. Let's see.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I forgot that there's applicable legislation as well. So the HVD categories are not necessary for this use case.
Yes.
Then yeah, but I don't see the big damage to be done if they are optional for distribution. But I don't see a clear use case as well. So.
And then there was a comment from Geraldine about the Inspire themes.
But that's, I think, a topic as well for the next webinar. Yeah.
Okay. So let's move on.
So wait.
So the situation is, I don't see any objections to making it mandatory for dataset and data service. There is a bit of a discussion about the optional for distribution, but I think overall, I've seen a couple of people agreeing to remove it.
So I would ask then, can we do a little line maybe and just in the chat, and removal of AVD.
I see that the general conclusion is, I think that two distributions of a data set will not have different categories. So in that sense, it would be possible to remove it.
Yeah, so I would ask, just write it in the chat, and so I would ask to see +1s or -1s on it.
I see a -1 on the mandatory for data service from Hagar.
Yeah, but that's a different question then. We can come back to that.
Yeah.
So
I see all
community would
to remove it from distribution is the current preliminary decision. Yeah.
Okay.
And then we have the comment from Hagar on mandatory for data service.
Yes. So Hagar, would you like to give some oral feedback on it?
Sorry, it took me a while to unmute myself. Yes, I'm just not so sure we can really foresee all the. It limits for me the idea of what a data service is, because it's not a data service can serve many data sets, and there you should infer the fact that it's a high value data set from the serves data set property. I mean, it's a high value data set, not data service. The fact of having access to the data set via the data service is the requirement in the end. So for me, semantically speaking, it should be focused on the data set itself. You risk making the existence of the data service not so clear by categorizing it directly, for me.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody else?
So maybe a comment. I think this is a bigger discussion that we have kind of ignored for a long time, the existence of data services independently. I had an issue regarding whether we should clarify when data services are independently described as kind of data manipulation rather than connected to a data set, or it is just serving an individual data set or maybe many data sets. And having the applicable legislation on a data service is then only necessary if it is an independent one. Otherwise, it will be connected to the dataset and then it can be inferred.
Yep.
And therefore, also the category follows from that discussion. I don't know if this is a discussion, when we're going to have this discussion, if ever. But it would be nice if we could have some conclusion and a joint view on this at some point, because it will help us to make other decisions going further.
Good.
Okay. At this moment, and so since it's it's not a clear yes or no in the sense of is it dependent or independent, and so in the sense of we allow both or the only dependent ones. So leaving that in the middle means that at this moment we have to make, let's say, the more open assumption that there exists and they would be existing as independent, and therefore at the moment would do extra annotations additionally. Now, I understand the argument. And in this case, on the high value data sets, it might be that it's only about dependent ones. Okay, but it's of course, then you have to see in how far in the reporting and in the context, if this is sufficient. So this is as well a bit towards the implementation of the high value dataset implementing regulation. If you have a service that supports two datasets which are in different categories, if we want to highlight this at the service level already or not.
But I understand this is a more fundamental discussion about the role of data services in relation to data sets. So I think then that is a point where we cannot reach a decision today. That we need to look at the use cases and the implications of either making it mandatory or optional or even removing it. I think this is a little bit of an investigation that is necessary.
I think this is indeed requires more preparation to answer that question.
Okay. So we'll keep that on the list for further discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. That's going to happen in the issue, I guess, on GitHub in 307.
We probably could create a different issue for that then.
Okay, so that's that decision there is. I don't see any objections to making HUD category mandatory for dataset. I think there is a consensus to remove it from distribution, and for the category on data service, we are going to create a new issue for further discussion. Hopefully that we can resolve that by the next webinar on the 21st of November.
Okay. Yeah.
Let's go ahead. Yeah.
Can I ask something still? Because I'm not very sure. The explanation was not clear to me why we couldn't handle it as a DCAT team subproperty like we do with the Inspire teams or the ISO categories, etc. So that's not clear to me why it's not a DCAT team instead of DCAT-AP high value data set category. So it really gets another one, and all the others are just subproperties of a DCAT team. So why do we handle differently?
The reason is that this code list, this categorization is really tied to the implementing regulation. It's the section headings of the implementing regulation. So it's not a thematic teaming that is aligned with other teams. So you could still make it okay. If whether or not you make it a subproperty of DCT subject or team, DCAT team, and that will not change the fact of the code list will be different.
Okay, yeah, but I don't understand the difference. Like in the ISO categories or the Inspire teams, they are still also different and can be mapped to align semantically, but yeah, I don't see the difference in this case. There are different obligations and different regulations, so I don't see the difference really. It's not clear to me, I'm sorry.
You mean it's not clear that the values are different, or it's not clear
I think the question is, why is DCAT-AP HVD category not a subproperty of DCAT team?
Indeed.
But that's a different issue that we could make like that. But the question is, what do we mean with team here or DCT subject? Because it's actually
no. I think what she says is, why is it not a subproperty of DCAT theme?
That is the question. Well, for what are we going to use DCAT team? That's the question then.
No, that's not the question. The question is, the DCAT-AP HVD category is now a subproperty of DCT subject, but not of DCAT theme. But Inspire themes are a subproperty of DCAT theme.
Not all the Inspire teams are the Inspire in GeoDCAT, they are a subproperty of DCAT. They are not a subproperty, they are just DCAT team. That's another issue.
Yeah, they are DCT subjects indeed, and not DCAT teams. I think.
Yeah, so some of them are DCT subjects, so the ISO categories are DCT subjects, whereas there is a team, an Inspire team, which is just used as a controlled vocabulary for DCAT team in GeoDCAT-AP. So the approach is here the same. It's a different property with a clear code list, with a clear semantics. Now the question is this a theme or a subject? Okay, that's a different question. And then I'll leave in the open instead of what people would like to see and what would like to do with it.
But I see a couple of people who are in agreement with Geraldine.
But it would be great to align in a way.
What to align? To align the property or to align the code list?
No, the properties. We're talking about the properties. Just the property.
Yeah, is everyone agreeing with the property?
Could I say one thing? We have the DCAT theme taxonomy on the level of the catalog, which is kind of indicating for what purpose we are using DCAT theme within one catalog. And it could, in principle, of course, allow, I don't know, do we allow multiple DCAT theme taxonomies?
That's one of the topics to be discussed, how to handle it.
So,
but
I would just say that from an implementer's perspective, if we just use DCAT theme for everything, it will be harder because you need to know what to look for when we filter and create facets and stuff. So it becomes more complicated from an implementer's perspective. I would prefer to keep the DCAT theme clean and only have the major categorization and then move everything else into DC terms subject, which becomes more complicated. Of course, we can have multiple different properties for all needs, but that defines the purpose of the interoperability perspective. So I would, and having it a sub-property of the DCAT theme would then infer it to be a DCAT theme, which will fuck up some situations for implementers anyway. So yeah, from an implementer's perspective, keep DCAT theme clean. That's what I would argue for.
Is this a separate discussion, Bert, that we need to have offline?
I think that's one of the discussions to have on the next webinar. Huh?
Okay, so we'll put it on the next webinar, and we'll just ask people to continue providing comments on that. Is there an issue for that?
I don't know if we have a separate issue. There's mentioning in several issues of it, but so there's no separate, let's say, that I have top of my head, let's say, posted here.
So can we create one?
Yeah, we can create one, yes.
Okay, let's create one for that particular one, which has nothing to do basically with the issue 307 here at hand.
No, it's nothing to do with that.
Okay, so I think we have a conclusion of what we're doing with 307. And so I will suggest we move on.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. The next one is the following. The question we in the high-value dataset implementing regulation, there is a need to express the quality of service of APIs, of data services. We did this and we implemented this by mapping it on a property on both page and requesting a document that would describe the quality of service of that API. The issue was raised that this is actually conflicting with an earlier on request where on general documentation for data services, the same property was suggested. So the question now is okay, how we resolve that? Can we find an agreement on between the two usages? And so the proposition is as follows, is to add a property documentation, so to lift and not to name it quality of service, map it to both page for a data service. This is an optional property in DCAT-AP, so it can be used here. And in the high-value dataset, DCAT-AP high-value dataset, we will add a usage note that in the context of the high-value dataset, if you want to express, or if you express quality of service information, you should put the information in this property. So that would align both proposals.
Any comments on that?
The only thing I raised this issue, and the question is quality of service. We don't have a regulation requirement to separate the quality of service from other documentation, because that's what you're saying, that there might be a confliction between the two. But we don't care about that. If so, everything is fine and we can move on.
Yeah, so at this moment, there is in the implementing regulation just a requirement for expressing this kind of information. It's not detailed. This doesn't give you certain parameters or so on, and that's not listed in there. It is only requesting that quality of service information should be presented. And this is the most, let's say, a generic catch-all approach, a place where we can put it in a uniform way.
Perfect, thank you. Then this is enough. I think it's a good solution.
Comments from others in support of this proposition or with objections? Don't see anything coming in on the chat. People want to express plus minus, plus ones or minus ones? Gerald,
can I have something extra, maybe as a suggestion? In the Inspire world, they say what the quality of service needs to be, and then you can state through a conforms to element, for example, if you are conform to that or not. So for example, we have the network services, and then in that regulation, it states like you have to be 24/7, 99% uptime, and answering in 2 seconds, for example. And then you can say in your service, I'm conform to that regulation or not. So maybe this could be a suggestion, to get in time that we have the quality of services that you have to reach, and then you can say, okay, I'm conform to that or not. That's a bit the other way around, but maybe less difficult than stating it else. I don't know.
I think that kind of, so at the level of the high value dataset implementing regulation, there's no such let's say minimal quality levels have been expressed, so this is not present. So it will really be on the domain itself. Now at the level of if such things are present, suppose that such for your domain and for your high value data set, this things is present in your domain, then you could link to it. So this is part of the documentation probably that you could mention. So this is not a thing necessarily is a link to a single page. So this can be multiple documents as well. So it might be a local one plus a generic one or something like this. And, so documentation is open in the number.
Okay, so I have 3 pluses, and Geraldine also added an element to reach a landing page for status information. I think that would also be one of the possibility of linking with this forward page. In the interest of time, I see only plus ones, so I would suggest to move on and consider this proposal to be accepted.
Yes.
Yeah. Next one.
Okay, this
we
one
owe an answer to Pascal.
Sorry, I missed it. Yeah, Pascal had a comment about whether we have the possibility to use DCT conforms to on a data set to provide information about the application profile in use.
That is a property at the level of the catalog record we have there, and but that's beyond the high value data sets. So we have later on in our additional ones.
It's a more general point that we can come back to later.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Hope that's okay, Pascal. We'll come back to it later.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Good. So this challenge is that it has been raised in the context of the high value data set, that if we look to the class data service, that this is a catalog service, a resource at the level of the data set, but for a data set we are expressing the need for a publisher, a relationship with an agent, and which should not be a data service have that on the same base quality or same relationship. So we don't have this at the moment. This is not requested within the high value data set implementing regulation to have this relationship with a publisher. So this is not a direct request from that legislation out. So therefore, we think this is a better question to be handled in generic into DCAT-AP. So we propose to discuss that topic, where you see here on the publisher with a data set in the catalog, but applicable to a data service, to discuss that in DCAT-AP. So not only just from the high value data set, there's no need, but that more that it will follow the outcome of the discussion in DCAT-AP. So here we do a bit of separation of concerns. I wanted to raise it and to give an answer that in the context of high value data, there's no need, but it's a valid question that we will tackle in DCAT-AP. So at the moment, I would postpone this question for the next session.
Okay, so we'll take it later on, and then we can discuss it further. Okay.
Yeah. So just to, there's a bit of information now, but this is important that you know that we handle this. A similar one is the question on did we use the class vcard kind or the property the range vcard in the terms of contact points correctly? There is a topic that is actually the issue is in two. Then the examples we agree that we should adjust to another superclass, the other abstract class. But the question was as well here in the context of high value datasets raised, well, maybe you should be more specific in the individual's use of the subclasses of the vcard kind of the contact points there. And that one we as well want to discuss in DCAT-AP. So it's not high value dataset necessarily related, but we want to raise it here to close this so that we can close it and move, have the discussion in DCAT-AP and to see what is the best outcome over there. And this will then trickle down and apply to high value datasets too. So these two were on that level. Information how we handle that. And now a bit more complicated. You see that we have 3 slides for it. Is that if we have a catalog and you see the catalog, then we have a property applicable legislation, which has a cardinality as result the ELI, the high value, and in the context of the high value datasets regulation, it will be the ELI of the high value dataset implementing regulation. But the semantics of that case was unclear. So what are the 2 use cases we have to consider? Either this catalog that is represented here is a reporting catalog. And what is a reporting catalog? Is a catalog that contains all the information from a member state in the context for the high value dataset that is given to assess to the auditing authority to check if the member state has satisfied all the requirements of the implementing regulation. So that's a reporting catalog. It's a very specific catalog with all the information necessary at the metadata level to do this assessment. And that's different from a harvesting catalog where we would say, okay, there is some information, some data sets, some data services, some distributions that are in the context or in the scope of the high value data set implementing regulation. And that can be useful information if we do harvesting. So if you have a catalog 1 and another catalog, and you see that in one there is an indication to the high value data sets regulation, you could say, I harvest that one, I read that in because I have interest in that one, where in the other one, there's not an indication and you can ignore it. So it's more a useful mean to scope and to say, okay, there's some information in my catalog that is in the context of this legislation. And the cardinalities were unclear to specify what are the semantics of it. So what is the proposition? Is to make clear that we, at the catalog level that we presented in the context of the high-value dataset, DCAT-AP high-value dataset in this annex, that we have indicated this as a harvesting reading. So there is some information in the catalog that is relating to this legislation. And so you can use it for the harvesting use case. And that we create a specific instance, a specific subclass. And so in Europe, it would be 28, 29, depending on how far it so on goes, that the high-value dataset reporting catalog is a specific subclass with additional requirements. And the minimal requirement what we have at this moment, it will be having the only value for this applicable legislation will be the high-value datasets ELI. And there will be additional requirements that will be imposed on this reporting catalog, but we don't have specified that yet. To illustrate that, we made an example taken from the issue, of course. So you can have a national catalog which says, okay, I have some datasets, high-value datasets, and datasets Data Governance Act in my catalog available, and I indicate this at the catalog level in an aggregated way. Look, I have information about high-value datasets, the Data Governance Act, and maybe there's some additional information, PSI, there's something that is related to it. If we have another catalog, I called it here the NAP Core catalog, there's only about the NAP Core mobility information into it. There's nothing about high-value datasets in this one. So if you do the harvesting, you only have to look to the first one and not to the second. And the last case, of course, if we want to give a reporting, then we only want to give the reporting about the real scope and the thing where I have to be assessed upon, and then it's only containing this datasets, high-value dataset. So this is just to indicate the balancing act to be done. And as the proposal is to have the cardinalities more open at the catalog level and indicates a new class reporting catalog where it has to be more strict 1.1. The reason why it is in the first 1N is because in the scope of the high-value datasets, there will be at least the value of the implementing regulation of a high-value dataset. In DCAT-AP, this is just an optional property, so you can have 0 to N.
There's a comment from Geraldine. I think, Geraldine, you question the fact that in the reporting catalog, it can only be the HVD reporting implementation regulation. Can you say something?
Well, it's a good idea. The second slide was very elaborating on that, that it's not only HVD only, but it's then just, does it contains everything, like the Inspire Directive, the Water Framework Directive, etc. So all the regulations have to be over there then to do it once only. So that's a very good idea. And otherwise, you just can filter on the HVD categories otherwise, and you don't have to make that list because filtering on that category can make it as well for a reporting or harvesting like we do for Inspire. But it's a good idea if it collects all directives and regulations.
Yeah, so the reporting catalog is a special case. So this is to be established, and it could be a query on the top level one. It could be a query, it could be the outcome of a query. It's not determined yet. We just want to give a clear meaning to it, that there might be additional reporting information that should be collected and to be what should be there to be assessed, to have a pointer to it.
There's a question from Cecile, whether it's necessary to identify what the resource does with the legislation. So whether it is complies or fulfills. So the role of the legislation. Currently, there's just one link that refers to applicable legislation without details of what that means.
Yeah, so at this moment, there's, I think, not a lot of distinction made between in that kind of cases. If there's needs on to make such kind of subtle distinctions, then we have to see how this is should be formulated the best way.
Yeah, so just also because I was questioning, but I'm a bit jumping into the soup now. I'm not sure I have the whole context, but I was wondering whether the specialization of reporting catalog could not be, for me, simplified by having, instead of a reporting catalog, that it's a catalog that is linked with the legislation for the purpose of reporting one legislation that is HVD, but I also think that it's not only HVD that will require this type of catalogs in the future. So I thought, but maybe I'm a bit do not have sufficient details. I thought that it could be more generic to qualify the links with legislation instead of having them as a property inside the catalog. Yeah.
Yeah. But at this moment, yeah, let's see to this level if there's more qualification on the link needed. That might make the, let's say, the semantics more cleaner or more split it out easier. This notion of reporting catalog is just to highlight as well that there's a difference between the reporting and the harvesting or the collection of it. So that's.
I have a question from Pascal. The reasoning here, the catalog is a harvesting endpoint. Is that correct?
The reasoning is that indeed the catalog that you see at top level is indeed the harvesting, the one that you would indicate there is information in my catalog about high value data sets in this case. So the subset is within the scope of the high value data sets. There's in my catalog information about.
Matthias has his hand raised.
Yeah, I like this naming of reporting and harvesting catalog, but if you take and compare it with the data set, if you have something like a theme or a keyword that applies somehow to the whole data set and all of these distributions, and from the same perspective, if you have an applicable legislation on a catalog that somehow applies to all of the data sets within, that's how I would think of it, since we have an explicit relation between the catalog and the data sets. So from that perspective, I think it would make more sense to say that you add applicable legislation on the catalog level manually when you know that this is a catalog that is solely constructed from a reporting perspective around HVD. It will also, the opposite approach, the harvesting approach to detect something would also have the effect that you more or less would have to have a rule that says that whenever you have a data set inside of a catalog that is an HVD data set, you should also add the property on the level of the catalog. Otherwise, you would miss things. And such a rule would have to be enforced, would require implementation. So what you're saying, the suggestion you are making here is having real world consequences in terms of how people will implement harvesting mechanisms. I would also say it's easier to detect this. You don't have this property. You can just search for triples applicable legislation with the correct legislation URI, and you will find it without having to have this on the catalog level. So I would argue that your suggestion here makes life harder, not easier, and I would argue for the reporting catalog option instead.
So it would only the reporting. So you would argue that the catalog here is, let's say, restricted to reporting only.
Yes.
Okay, at least this clarifies, so our example clarifies the wording, that's good. So is there any other feedback on it from others?
There are some other questions, but not opinion on using only the one, the second one for the reporting catalog and not requiring the legislation to be on the harvesting one.
I follow Matthias in the sense that he is right that it has to be on the resources, because we have only one catalog in Flanders, for example, and some data sets in there are for Inspire, some of them are for PSI or for now HVD. So it's not only on the catalog, it should be on the resource itself.
I don't think there's the suggestion was to put it only on the catalog. The suggestion is to put it also on the catalog.
Okay, okay.
Certainly, it needs to be on the data sets themselves.
Okay.
No question about that.
Yeah, this is indeed a discussion about what is the meaning of the property at the level of the catalog, what we expect. And is the catalog, and Matthias' suggestion is, after the example to show that we created here, is to say, okay, the catalog that I see there is only the reporting catalog, and in that case I expect that it has a single value, namely the ELI of the high value data set, and maybe some additional quality expressions additionally associated with it. That's his suggestion. And the reason, the motivation is that we interpret all properties of a catalog as the aggregation of some global statement over all data sets or all catalog resources in the catalog. Correct, Matthias, if I summarized it as correct?
Yes, to some extent, but also the risk otherwise that you will trust this property on the catalog level and therefore not check, and you may, and then you have enforced something that needs to be implemented in all providers, that you make sure that you actually add this property on the catalog level as well. And if you fail, you will miss in the reporting sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's a question from Ulrika, which is sort of out of the scope, thinking that the HVD is part of the PSI directive, or the Open Data Directive, and they're separate because they're two different, there's a directive and a regulation. So any questions there may you want to pose to the people at the DG Connect?
Michal, would you like to take the floor?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
That was a question for the Commission on the relationship between high-value data sets and Open Data Directive, right?
Yes.
I think what Ulrika has written, that's correct. The Open Data Directive applies to all public sector information that is accessible and reusable, and some of them are high-value data sets. It's a subset of Open Data Directive data. And indeed, the PSI is an old term. Now we call it Open Data Directive.
Okay. But that's thanks for the clarification. And then Licinio has a question about how this can be applicable to data sets from the eHealth data space. What do you see as the problem there, Licinio?
I was wondering how this reference to the regulation, applicable legislation, may actually be used in that scope.
You're saying that in some data sets, I guess, of the eHealth data space are within the scope of the high-value data sets?
Well, not particularly in this property that we are looking at, applicable legislation. If this is something that we can also use in in the European health data space datasets.
Yes. Yes. So it's this general use, and of course here we discuss the use within the high-value datasets implementing regulation.
Thank you for that note.
Cecile?
Yeah, so but a question is whether the reporting catalog could be something that is instantiated under a health regulation, you see. So it was also a bit in my first reflection, because now you consider the reporting catalog, if I understand properly, as a class that is only used in the context of the high value data sets because of the regulation of the need for having the proper metadata, blah blah blah, associated with these data sets that are in scope of the high value data set. But
okay.
Yes, I understand correctly. And what I wonder, and I don't know sufficiently the health regulation, but it can be that in health regulation they also mandate the expression of data sets with metadata, and it's a question to Licino. And in that case, whether this reporting catalog would not make sense also in their case. Voilà.
Now I understand your question better, Cecile. So that's good. So as far as I know, I don't think in the health case, Lucine, you contradict me if I'm wrong, or Pascal, if there's a need for a reporting level there. I don't think it's there. It's more about just interoperability and sharing. Rather than about reporting. So in the case of high-value datasets, we have it explicitly. So the notion of reporting is important. Obviously, this is a separate section, articles into it.
But I'm not able to answer that because I'm getting familiar with the concept, so I'm learning here. I would prefer not to say yes or no at this point. I would say good that we are learning about this possibility.
Okay, good. And then I see just popping by a suggestion from Sander to, let's say, have another property to make it more clear, and then say, okay, in the context of a catalog, not have applicable legislation, but have another property called reports on legislation, to indicate whether that you only fill it in the case of reporting or sharing it in a particular context of a legislation.
What is then your answer to that, Bert?
Sorry, Max. Sorry.
Your answer to Sander's question whether it could be a different property.
But yes. So the question is should we use the same property and explain it in the text, or should we? Is there from the community out say, okay, maybe the property here should be changed to make it clearer, or is the class sufficient, and then we use the same property? So
but it goes back also to a comment that Cecile made earlier. Do we have sort of make it specific what this does with the particular legislation? Sander, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was thinking if the property is very explicit, that it would imply within, if you actually add the property to a certain catalog, that this is in fact a reporting catalog. That would avoid having to double type or to have a different subclass of the catalog, because that's always an issue, because some people will double type it and some will implement the subclass and others will do something else yet, and it actually, well, especially with the implementation of the subclass, well, you need to be able to interpret that it is in fact a subclass. So in an operational system, it always becomes a bit messy. So if the property could have sufficient semantics that to sort of that you can infer that it is in fact you could interpret it as a reporting catalog, that would for me be better than having to implement a subclass.
Yeah, but I think also what you're saying is that it really needs to be explained well. So there needs to also be, whatever you do, you need to have a good usage note for people to understand what to do, so that it doesn't happen what you're saying, that people do it differently. But I understand.
Yeah, exactly. That if you use this property, that there is a lot of attached semantics that apply to your catalog, and that the whole thing might be interpreted a bit differently.
I saw Cecile with her hand up.
Yes, I saw in the chat that I think it was Flanders who said that they have one catalog for any type of data sets. And I have a question whether this high value data set mandates to have its specific catalog, because otherwise this discussion that we have at catalog level should be taken at resource level. And so it's a question whether the high value data set really mandates to have a catalog that specifically a catalog, or whether these metadata that you want to capture could not be at resource level.
Good.
So what implementing regulation says, that you have to specify for each data set well-defined metadata. So that's everything what's inside the catalogs, and the goal is that existing metadata that's already present in the open data portals can be augmented with a few extra quality checks and extra information to be compliant with the high value dataset implementing regulation. So that's the level of the quality improvements that the regulation imposes. But then there's this part of reporting. And when it comes to reporting, then somehow we should be clear that there's a difference between what you have supplied as the report versus what is generic metadata, additional information that is actually related but not necessary for the reporting. And to distinguish between that's the reason for this existing of this extra catalog. This reporting catalog is the name of the entity, the catalog, the information, the metadata that you're going to supply, and say, okay, assess me on this level of that, and make a statement of that. So that's where the word reporting catalog comes from. So it can be, ideally, it is a smart query on data.europa.eu for a specific member state. That's the ideal case.
That's actually, Matthias had a comment there in the chat that actually says basically what you're saying. You can generate the reporting catalog from the data in the other catalogs just for the reason of reporting.
Yeah.
Without.
So the goal is to achieve this level of let's say machine readable expectation. Of course, we have to see if this is possible or not. But if we would say it here, we would collect it and we would timestamp it. Then we would have saying this is the reporting catalog that I have to be addressed or to given to Commission from a member state.
Matthias argues that the whole idea of having this applicable legislation in the catalog is not necessary because you can actually generate it from the information in the datasets.
Yes, you can.
Then the only thing is that maybe you want to provide some metadata on such an automatic catalog to indicate that it is a report, but that is somehow outside of the scope of the metadata itself. We don't necessarily have to have an indicator for this. It's a URI or an API call to some country-specific way of fetching the information to the reporting catalog.
Okay, so that seems to be a number of people. I think Cecile has her hand up again.
Yes, sorry to be a pain. I wonder whether this catalog is really necessary, because as I think that this reporting obligation is to be able to monitor the fact that HVD is really that member states are compliant with HVD, and isn't it possible just via a query? If you have your catalog and you search for applicable legislation, you would get the data sets that are are the ones that are mandated by the HVD. No? And the question is whether it's really necessary or whether they are additional metadata that are mandated and that are not part of the current catalog. But otherwise, I don't see why we would replicate the information.
Okay, I think that's a support for what Matthias said. You can just derive the data sets that are that need to be reported on from a query to see which data sets has these the link to the applicable legislation, which is the implementation.
And just to let you know that there are already ways to comply with some reporting rules, reporting obligations that are dynamic ways. So it's not needed to be to have stored data. Reproduced or aggregated data. If you can reproduce it by dynamic queries, it's allowed.
So, Bert, I think what I hear is that people say, well, let's not create this subclass of catalog and just make the selection of the data sets something that you can do on the fly.
Yes, sure. That was already from the beginning the idea. So this is just a name, and so that's clear that this can be created, and that there's a difference between a generic catalog versus what you put in the report.
Yeah, so we don't have to create an explicit subclass for the catalog. That makes it simpler, as Matthias said.
Yes. Should we then still keep the property, because the consequence of all the discussion is to keep the property at the catalog level at all?
I don't. Looking at the discussion, I think it's not necessary, because you can actually derive it from the data sets.
So it would be.
You can even use the keyword then instead, because you tagged it with the keyword as a resource on the high value data set category.
The categories, not the keywords, the categories.
Yeah. We have the annotation on the resources. That's fine, so we can find it. Now the question is, do we need it on the catalog? And it seems to be that now the community is in agreement to remove it. I just want to check it. It's just a question to check it. That this is the conclusion, so that we have.
That's the proposal to remove the applicable legislation from the catalog.
From catalog, and I'll put it in the chat, just to be sure. This is just formal to agree.
Okay, I see all pluses to remove, plus to remove, plus to remove. So I think that's a clear.
Okay.
from the community here. Bet, we had a short break planned. Do you want to take that now for 5 minutes, or do you want to continue?
Maybe let's continue that we have done high-value data sets, and then we.
But then we're at the end of the 2 hours, so we can actually have the break now. Or we can,
okay. Then we should take a break now. Then it's,
let's people have to stretch their legs for 5 minutes. So we'll come back at at 30.
Okay, good. Then
Okay, shall we continue?
Okay. Yeah. Camera on.
Yes, we can.
Going back to the audience requirements.
Okay, good. I'll go back to audience requirements.
Okay, go ahead.
So the next two aspects is more kind of an information because it's explaining how the application profile, the annex, will be taken form in the future. And that's not yet settled, and it has to do with that we have a discussion on the next webinar on the relationship between the annex and DCAT-AP and other profiles. So what is observation is that if we look today at the annex, the DCAT-AP high-value datasets annex, then you see that there are a number of properties mentioned which are identical to DCAT-AP. And they are there because of a reason, but they make the specification probably longer than necessary. And what is the reason why they are necessary? If you come from a policy side and you have this is your first encounter with DCAT-AP, then you are looking for the terms in the policy, in the legislation, how they are represented in the metadata. So you want to have somehow a relationship with it. And therefore, since we have already metadata terms for certain terminology, they are presented into the annex, just to make the mapping from that side easier and the readability from that side easier. Of course, if you're a DCAT-AP maintainer, catalog maintainer, then you are looking way more what is the additional efforts my editors have to do, or dataset publishers have to do, how we can do that in the simplest and the minimum way possible. So these are the, let's say, the two sides that we have to take, and this we want to discuss in a broader discussion on how to create profiles and how to represent then profiles or annexes with regard to each other, so that we have let's say, a common strategy towards these specifications, so this kind of specifications and these challenges. So that is work in the next webinar. So we still want to keep this relationship with the regulation to, in some way, this is, if it's not in the tables of the classes, then it will become somewhere else. So this will be the kind of discussion. But we, at the same time, want to make this balance that it is as minimalistic as possible, so to limit the reading, the need of reading of other expectations. What as well is to note for the annex is that this annex is based, and if you are aware of metadata of DCAT, mostly on DCAT-2. Now, why is that? Because in the implementing regulation, there is the expressions of data sets, APIs, data services, distributions, bulk download, it is available, and a catalog reporting. So these things are there and they map very well on DCAT-2. The additional extras that we find in DCAT-3 dataset series are not explicitly mentioned in the implementing regulation. So in that sense, the annex is applicable in an immediate fashion to DCAT-3. So we and that we want to make it in such a way, and so the outcome of the representation, we want to make it in such a way that it is as long as possible version agnostic. What we mean with it is that if you read the current annex, then you can apply it in a DCAT-3 as well. So this is the goal, that we make a stable document that can be evolved or be aligned with a minimal, let's say, editorial changes to align with next versions of DCAT and DCAT-AP. all this work, so this discussion might change or might have impact on the representation, so it can be substantial. So at this moment, there is not yet, we cannot say that the current version of DCAT-AP high-value datasets is the final representation. So that will be determined after the next webinar, what we have to do on that.
So you're suggesting that after the next webinar, we're going to do the rewrite?
Yeah, we're going to do the rewrite based on the feedback and the comments we get from you as community to say, okay, this is the way, the step forward to make it, let's say, a road towards interoperable profiles.
But you're now on a different slide, I think.
Yeah. So that was on this.
So issue 312 is open for people's comments on this proposition.
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
And then we have a question, and this is just want to stress this in the sense that the DCAT-AP high-value datasets annex is about the general metadata, what is expressed in the implementing regulation in the DCAT-AP terminology. But of course, there is a need and to express sometimes more metadata according to the domain requirements. So in each domain, in each data category, for each data set, there might be additional metadata requirements. And those are not listed here. So we only have the generic ones. And if you have specific ones, you have to tackle that first in the domain, and you can use or conform to the implementing regulation in a way by using DCAT-AP high-value datasets as a reference point. It's a good point to check in your discussions in the domain, do I have all the information and can I combine it together? Because in the end, we want to have a global reporting over all kinds of domains, and DCAT-AP high-value datasets is a way that you can do that for your member states. So that you are domain agnostic, but somehow map your domain, your individual data domain, individual data sets and metadata requirements to DCAT-AP high-value datasets, and then it comes up, and then the information can be shared. So just to make this as a setting, means that there's still some work in your individual domains. And I know that in the GeoDCAT, in the Inspire context, this has started now, where they look into the metadata individuals and to see how this aligns, and they can take this as inspiration.
Pascal asks, does this apply to GeoDCAT and StatDCAT? And I think you just said that. So
yeah, so in particular to GeoDCAT, because this is strongly related with the Inspire community, and they will do activities to look into that.
And Geraldine says she has a suggestion.
Yeah, maybe it's also a good way of thinking, like Inspire does. Eventually, we started this way as well, like you did. But over time, they made guidelines, not annexes in the same directive, but guidelines separate per domain. And then you could state, IAM conforms to this guideline with my data set or not. And so it's our conformity statements, like in data quality aspects, that you say, okay, here is the guideline, and then you check it is conform or it is not. And that way you don't have to put everything in the metadata, but you have it in the guideline where you say, okay, these are the arrangements, like it is now in the annexes. But then you can say for this data set, it's conform or it's not. And that's easier to hand it automatically out of the metadata as well for the report, for example. So this could be a solution as well for this regulation.
Okay. I think this is something connected with a suggestion connected with a discussion we have in it's not one of the issues that is mentioned here, where there was a request to be detailed conformity, to have a detailed conformity with the requirements into it. For instance, you have to express information about these attributes, these pieces of information. And we decided in the second webinar that we wouldn't go to that level of detail to express this in machine readable, but it could be that this kind of I'll call it a self-assessment or something like this, a check that we could, suggestion, if I understand it right, Caroline, that could be added. And so that we, as a generic approach, that could be an additional suggestion to add in it.
There's a question from Casper, an overview of which initiatives, and I think we're going to get there.
Yeah, we're going to get there. Yeah, that's next. So I think, Geraldine, I would suggest your self-declaration to be added in as a GitHub issue. And if some people are more into it, then we can take it up and maybe add it to the annex as well.
Yes, perfect. We didn't have the time yet. I'm sorry for that. We didn't reach the 30th of September. Sorry.
Yeah, okay, good. Good. Then just to conclude, and then on high-value data sets, and Pascal, we come later to you. So what is the finalization of our work is now we have discussed the different issues. With this, we still think we can close or come to a good annex that can be used as a reference point and as a basis for the reporting obligations and generic metadata for the high-value data sets implementing regulation. So we will do the editorial changes based on the discussion of the next webinar. And based on that, we want to present this outcome on the PSI expert group, who is in the end in charge of the policy enforcement and sharing on that. So that is what we want to do. You see the current, still the reference to the current candidate release. We will update that and share at the point when we are ready the final link and to the whole community.
Any comments here from the people of the PSI expert group? Yuri?
Excuse me, Max, can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, do you have any observations about the timeline here?
The PSI group, we still haven't sent out the invitations for the 14th of December, but we really plan to do it on the 14th of December, and it would be a good occasion to present to the PSI group members where we are with DCAT-AP. They have been informed in the past that DCAT-AP should be available probably before the end of this year, so they are expecting it.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Thank you, Bert.
Okay, thank you. So then, if nothing else is to be said, then I'll move to our next part, which will be short.
Bert, just to clarify a bit that some issues that we were expressed at the beginning under the context of the high-value data set, we thought that they are very important and that they can be implemented and should be tackled at a higher level, meaning at the level of DCAT AP3. That is the reason why they are not discussed during the current webinar, and we want to discuss them into the forthcoming webinar of the 21st of November. But this does not have a general impact on the decisions that are made for the high value data set, but help us to improve our specification. This is also this is connected to the documentation and how instructions are provided so that the stakeholders can have a better view, and also related to what Geraldine said about the guidelines.
Okay, Thank you, Pavlina. So to clarify this. Okay, so now I move to the last part of today's webinar. We want to share with you an overview of all the activities and around DCAT-AP and this whole ecosystem. So it's not only about DCAT-AP and high-value datasets, but there are other profiles where SDMX is actively be involved in terms of really taking in historically some leadership in editorial leadership into it, versus the broader community of data spaces where we touched upon in the previous webinar in September on interoperability over there. And this whole ecosystem, we want to give a sketch to you so that you see the live on the impact and what are the activities over there. It will be shorter as expected in time. So the goal is that with all our activities, we look towards how to align it and to make it possible that metadata created in the context of one specification, for instance, if you do it for mobility, that it can be reused in another context. And all this interoperability and aspects, that's the goal that we want to ensure that this is going to work. So this is the work and the art of the work, and we want to share now a bit of the things. For next time, we identified 53 issues that are related to the DCAT-AP specification as out of the 102. We already identified a number of them to be discussed in the next webinar. Some of them are just like others, requests for information and so on, but we identified a number of them and they are labeled the next webinar with the dates. So you can find them in the issue list. That are those, we are grouping them in 3 levels. The one on the editorial aspect, that will be one topic. So how to edit it, how to interoperable, how to make profiles good, interoperable with each other, and how to make them in such a way that the readability is good. So this is the first topic. We have a number of detailed topics where we have questions, yes, no, options to be discussed. And then we have a number of topics that are related to dataset series and DCAT tree alignment, essentially. So mostly about dataset series. That will be next time. If we look to our support for profiles, we have to take care about our URIs or new terms that we introduce. And for that, we have namespaces. SDMX supports 3 namespaces: the generic DCAT-AP namespace, specialized for GeoDCAT, and one for StatDCAT. For these ones, we did a bit of efforts on the ground, and we want to share with you that we are currently have new draft versions of those specifications available so that you can reuse those terms in an easier way. And that we can make a nice linked data specification as well. For the high-value dataset annex, those new terms are being included in a generic DCAT-AP namespace. So that's then you know where to find them.
There were 2 questions on the chat. One is Casper coming back and saying he wants to know which initiatives there are, and I'm not sure I understood what he meant. Casper, can you say what your question is?
Yes, I mean, I understand that conforming to high-value data and other regulations, that you mentioned that there are already initiatives to looking at how to deal with it. This is something that we are also looking at, of course. So it would be nice to combine it maybe. And it was not looking at the DCAT, but especially at the implementation of high value.
Okay.
More clear?
Yeah, so we are aware of one specific case, and it's the Inspire high-value data. They have a special working group just recently created that they will present their work in the Inspire conference at the end of November, but we are not aware of any other domains. So maybe Jirka or Mikhail are more aware of the other domains doing specific instances of high-value data sets. I have to pass that question to them.
Did you connect here? No, we are only aware about what you are describing over here. The Inspire community is looking at.
In that sense, we are only aware at this moment on the geospatial community. No. And this makes it the nicely connection for the geospatial community. This work on the geospatial community on high-value data sets as well triggered the combination of what does it mean for DCAT-AP and to collaborative with SEMIC and DG Environment and GRC, we're taking up a new activity, an alignment activity on DCAT-AP. So this is the outcome. It will be one hand side aligning high-value data sets, but the other hand side a generic DCAT-AP and improvement and integration with the latest version of DCAT-AP. So it is an open working group that will be restarted on DCAT-AP to make it aligned and to see what is needed for that community to better integrate with each other.
You'll have 5 minutes.
More information and the timeline after on the Inspire conference and starting after the Inspire conference. So it will be short time, but not immediate. We would like to inform you that we have as well DCAT-AP. So internally we assess how it could be aligned, but we have not done a public call out. And at this moment, we have not planned any immediate activities around DCAT-AP. So if you have interests and you want to do this, and you say, this is for my interest to do this alignment, please come to us. So inform it. About BREC DCAT-AP, that's a profile on base registries. We had a webinar in the beginning of this year, or so 21st of April. At that time, we concluded that that would be more sensible to make BREC DCAT-AP an annex like the higher value data sets. In the meantime, we got some interest and additional interest in the BREC DCAT-AP. So we will do the discussions on that and see what is the outcome of that to create this proposal and this DCAT-AP. As we know, we discussed high-value data sets. You all know it. We would like as well to inform you about a pilot that we have been doing. So if you have interest in the challenge, how to represent machine learning models or algorithms in general, and the data sets that are associated with them, to have an input or output of that process of those things and to make them findable and reusable and shareable. So the metadata around it, the description about that, we collaborated with a platform, OpenML, where machine learning models are being expressed and the data sets that are associated with it. And we used DCAT-AP to create a base metadata model. You can find the link and information over there. Again, if you have interest, you can express it directly to us or have a look and peek into the specification there. And then, as I said in the beginning, so it's not only about these ones that we have a direct activity upon. We want as well to share that the whole community. In the previous webinar on data spaces, we listened about mobility DCAT-AP, DCAT-AP health, and geo DCAT-AP. So that's discussed before. In the broader context of data spaces, this DCAT-AP is being adopted as a core component in cross data space data exchange. So that's, we have to, yeah, you know that is aware, and there are probably new profiles or additional requirements coming from that area. If you have aware of other activities that we have to look into it or that we can support in this broader area, please share it with us. That was the overview. Is there any question you have about the ecosystem that you would like to ask? Then if not, no, then I skip. This was the part, if everything went very smooth and with no comments, this will be for the next webinar. And so that I hope you to see there on the next webinar on the 21st of November. The issues that we are going to discuss and which are open for the discussion, you can find it on GitHub. So there's a label webinar 21st of November 23. And if you tick on that, you get a list of all the issues that we want to discuss in the next webinar. And of course, we cannot do that alone. And this is a whole ecosystem that we want to move forward together with you. Thank you for attending, for your feedback, and hope you to see you on the next webinar.
Marlena, you want to say the closing words?
Yes, thank you everyone for this fruitful discussion. I hope that your contribution to the issues that were discussed here was very valuable. We would like to encourage you to put any further comments into the GitHub space, so that, for example, to be able to finalize the specification and to have it ready for the next PSI working group. I think Matthias is referring to the code list for the high-value dataset categories of the publication office. Correct. It's under publication. We will publish them. It is sent to the publication office. And we would like to have you on board the 21st of November, where a number of issues are going to be tackled, so that it will be a very interesting webinar for not only the DCAT-AP, but also the things that have been escalated and referred to the high-value dataset. Thank you so much. Have a nice evening.
Okay, thank you. And see you again on the 21st of November.